when you're listening to it, you can literally see him doing like this. You know, it's like, you'll never play me. Can't believe you ever said that. I was like, you're never going to get money out of me. Like, bro, calm down.
Good afternoon, beautiful people. This is another episode of Album Mode. If you're listening to us for the first time, we review a new album every single week. We look at the lyrics, the production, the overall aesthetic of the album, and how that album fits into the context of that artist's career. My name is Adriel Smiley, a.k.a. AdrielSmiley.com, a.k.a. Adriel Smiley Official, a.k.a. The Godfather, and we are here for a very special episode of Album Mode with His Royal Highness, King Grant.
What's happening, people? We're back. This time it's a special episode. You know, the 50th anniversary or 50th birthday of hip-hop is this year, right? Where the crazy party happened, where people actually started rapping on purpose. This is not a mistake. You're hearing me rap on the microphone. I'm doing this on purpose, right? And this review, we're going to do an album. Actually, we're going to do an album every decade, right? To highlight the growth of the genre. Also, talk about some classic albums. The first classic album we ever did was like MF Doom years and years ago.
I think that's the only throwback episode we've ever done, yeah.
So, but this time we're doing NWA, Straight Outta Compton, 1988.
Straight Outta Compton.
This was back when like where you're from was actually like super, super important. Like listening to this project, you're listening to Straight Outta Compton. They literally say Compton on every single song.
No, it's on here a lot. I'm happy you brought that up to start with because I want to do a little bit of I won't say a deep dive, but go back in time to where hip hop was at this point when this album came out. Because that's part of listening to this project, because there's some songs on here that I don't think people think of when they think NWA.
Yeah.
There are definitely some on here that it's like, this NWA? Interesting.
Yep.
And you're right. Where you're from was a huge thing. I'm doing this story on the history of hip hop. That's something that people are mentioning a lot. Is at the beginning of hip hop, there was so much about where you're from, and New York was the base. If you weren't from New York, that was kind of like your identity. And like, I'm just not from New York.
Yeah, you're from X place, Y place.
And so them being from Compton, you know, obviously it's the name of the project. It's an iconic project. We see it all the time now, but that was huge at that time. Them coming out of California, because New York was the hub. Obviously, still is a hub. It's very important to hip hop, but
less so now. The hub shifts. It's gone to a point now where it shifts places.
It can move.
Atlanta is like the place right now.
And that's the thing I think that is so interesting about this project is like that none of that had happened yet. There was no Atlanta has its hub, Miami has its hub, New Orleans has its hub. None of that had happened yet. So this was the beginning of your city or state that's not New York can have a culture unto its own. So I'm happy we got this album to review because it's very, very historic.
Yeah. I think that when we're talking about like Straight Outta Compton, it's important to remember that like if you like your city was your identity like through and through on your music, like you mention it, I'm Demar and I'm from this place, or I'm Adriel, or I'm Patient Zero from this place, right? You would have like your whole. Everybody also introduces himself, which is a very old school hip hop thing to do.
So old school. On every song too.
And every song, people have this like, I'm Dr. Dre and I got this to say. It's crazy that like, because of it being at the beginning and also they're a group, I feel like they felt like they had to tell people that it's a different person that is now rapping, right? Like, because if you don't see the art, and NWA is an acronym, right? You can't really say it on radio.
Yeah.
You have to find a way to make sure that people like know that it's a different person rapping. So they would actually, Dr. Dre says it like, you know, I'm Dre and I'm the doctor. You know, he always rap something like that. So it's really interesting to see like in Straight Outta Compton, there's a lot of like identifying who I am, where I'm from, things that are happening. A lot of like identity is wrapped in the one project. Every single person is on the cover too. Yeah. So there's a lot of just like, this is me, this is who I am, this quote unquote realness, right? That's what this thing is all about.
The three singles from that project. The first one, Straight Outta Compton, came out in early July. Amazing choice for a first single. That song still hits as if It just came out.
Mm-hmm.
Gangster was the second single. That's one of my favorite songs from this project. Listen to this project again. I hadn't heard it in full in a long time. Gangster is probably the song that I play the most from this project. So to go back and see that it was a single kind of adds up to me.
Yeah.
And then Express Yourself was the third single. Yeah. And that's where I want to start in terms of production, because songs like Express Yourself, Something to Dance To.
Something to Dance To, like, I sorry to interrupt your Express Yourself, sir, but Something to Dance To, which is the last song on the project, Straight Outta Compton. That shit, I'm like, what the fuck is this, bro? I don't remember. I've listened to Straight Outta Compton a bunch of times in my life, and I'm like, what the fuck is this song doing on this album?
No, same. I don't remember. and that's like that and Express Yourself are tied to me. Those two songs, off Straight Outta Compton, Express Yourself, Something to Dance To, they're tied together because those are what we would call on this podcast pop reaches.
Yeah.
You know, like Express Yourself, that sample, the song is like, when you think of what NWA stands for and what that group means and, you know, who they represented, you don't think of Express Yourself, you know, or you don't think of Something to Dance To. But this, to me, is such a sign that this album is from the 80s. We always think 90s with NWA because Dre, Cube, Eazy-E had a lot of their success popularity in the 90s, but this album was made in the 80s. And there are so many, like, signs of that all over this.
Oh, my God, yeah.
And this is the one thing I wanted to mention. Now, hip-hop started from that party in the Bronx, everyone knows, Cool Herc, and it started from playing the breaks on a song. And the breaks they were playing from songs weren't hip-hop songs. It was breaks from soul songs, breaks from funk songs, sometimes breaks from disco. Jazz. And that drum style of those breaks ran through the 80s.
Yep.
And in the 90s where you see like the drums become more quote-unquote hip-hop, but a lot of the drums on this project are in that like 70s, early 80s breakbeat style. And it's like, again, you think of NWA as the hardest gangsters, and that's what it is. But again, it's this old 70s, early 80s rap style that is so much all over this project. And it's like, we can't forget, this is still the 80s. Rap hasn't really transformed yet, you know? So Something to Dance To is the one I think of all the time because there's no way, you can play that song for someone and there's a part in it where they're like rap talking. You know the part I'm talking about? And it's like that breakdown at the end, absolutely nuts. And no one would guess that this was NWA. Like if you didn't know. If you just heard if you know the voices for sure, but the actual production of that song, there's no way anyone would guess that's NWA.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you listen to something like Fuck the Police, that shit is very different. I think that one of the constants in Straight Outta Compton is the record scratch. There's a record scratch either to begin the song, end the song, beat switch.
And a lot in the chorus too.
Yeah, yes, exactly. They'll always rely on that record scratch, and that's like something, again, that's very 80s. Like this is like why we chose, like this was one of the 4 albums that we chose from that really shows you like the origin points. Obviously it's late 80s, so it's actually progressed. So we're not getting like, you know, the hip hop, you know what I mean? It is kind of like that though. It is kind of low key. It is a little bit
high key. I got some notes about that too.
Yeah, but something like, you know, the record scratch is like, you know, that's a hallmark of like old hip hop where the origins is like, you know, the person with the mic and the DJ like, you know, spinning the breaks, or, you know, like they flip the vinyl and like they do the record scratch in the background while you're rapping. So it's cool to see that it's still connected in that way, but it's pulling away because Dr. Dre's production definitely is more guitar-led music, which I think listening to Straight Outta Compton before, it was more like, oh, this is cool, like just a throwback listen. Right? But then now that we went back and like actually like looked at it, I'm like, holy shit, like all of their music is guitar-driven.
Crazy, right?
It's guitar-driven hip-hop music, which I never really thought about outside of like Run DMC, that they would be doing guitar-driven music. But, you know, on Fuck the Police, it's like a guitar lick that is driving the entire song, and then that right sound. So it's really interesting to hear that. But that's a signature to the album, is the guitar-led melodies for the tracks.
Yeah, the guitar-led melodies plus the record scratch.
Yeah.
That's basically the whole album right there.
Yeah.
And to see the record scratch be so prevalent on this project, and another example of this was made in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
We always think 90s with NWA, but we forget about their biggest hits, their entry to us came from the 80s. And this, to me, reminded me that what was big at this time that's definitely not something that happens right now is breakdancing. One of, one of the elements of hip hop, something that, again, hip hop was not even 20 years old at this point. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure the elements were way more prevalent in people's minds at that time. This album has a lot of stuff people are breakdancing to. Like, you hear that influence on a lot of these songs. So just to see all these elements of hip hop that are so normal at this time, it's so interesting. And you brought up the rap style.
Oh my God. Hold on before we get. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that because I was gonna go back to product more like the sounds.
We're still there.
Okay, so I think that when you go around to jump around, because I also to feel out what was happening, I jumped around, right, and I was like, okay, let me hear just like 8-Ball remix, right, and when we talk about 80s style production, that is literally like, you could have just copy and paste and like raise that out of the ground. It was like, this is what hip hop sounded like in the 80s. No melody, zero melody. And it's just like the drum loop and the record scratches, right? And that's when it started to feel dated to me. And that's what I was like,
Ooh.
I don't know if that's like, I mean, it's a product of the time, right? But that's when it really started to feel like, holy shit, this shit is old.
8-Ball's a good example of that. I think 8-Ball is really that old school style.
Like old school. Remember when 21 Savage did that song on Savage Mode 2? I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was a throwback. This is like this is the type of song that he was referencing to.
It's funny you mentioned him with Savage. He's someone I thought about with this project so much because of the content of what they're talking about. Because obviously this is one of the most notorious groups of all time. But if you hear the stuff that they're rapping about, no one is doing that now. Cube calling Jerry by name.
Oh yeah.
You know, even the song I Fuck the Police, everyone knows that song. But you hear what they're saying on that song, very different. And it's funny because the music now has been, talked about as being so violent. The drill is so violent. Hip hop is so violent. Everyone's dying. Comparing that to this, I don't feel like it's as violent. I think it feels way more caricature-y than this. This, like, NWA feels more actually violent than what's going on today. Run DMC, I think, was a huge influence on the style of rapping in this group. Because it feels like it's a mix of their past where Run DMC was maybe 3-4 years earlier, but they hadn't made it to where Rakim was at that time. And they're kind of in the middle. It's not, I'm the king of rock. It's not that.
Yeah, but it was getting there.
It's very, very close. And it's so interesting because up until then, people don't know, like, multi-syllable rapping.
That wasn't a thing until Rakim.
It was not even a thought.
Yeah.
Not even a thought. And so
they do that a couple of times. Ice Cube does it a few times where it's like, you almost hear like it becoming modern for a second when he does it, and then it snaps back, right? And you're like, oh wait, no, we're going backward,
Yeah, you said like you're almost getting there, but then you're not. And then MC Ren was the one who was clear to me, like, I think he's extremely underrated. Like, I think he's a better MC than Eazy, but he was the one who I almost expected him to rap a different way because of the rap I'm used to. I'm used to hearing a certain way of rapping, and he'll take the bar I think is going to go a certain way, and it will just go back to that 80s style. I'm like, yup, we're here. We're absolutely here.
Yeah, I think the rapping style, it's kind of like this, it shows you how far we've come. And it also shows you that the old heads who are like, people who are better rappers back then don't remember the music they were listening to whatsoever. Because if you were listening to like something like that, and it's like this, again, super simple drum loop. It's like, and it's like that, you know what I mean? It's like a very, very simple, and it's, saying this, and I'm going over here, and I'm doing all of this, right? And I'm like, this guy is better than Kendrick Lamar. I'm having those like epiphany, or not even epiphany, just like a real questioning of what older heads think about like the music that they listened to when they were coming up versus music now, where they were like, oh, I can't even understand what they're saying, or the production is carrying the entire song. And then I'm like, well, if you listen to Straight Outta Compton on real shit, there's like a lot of good songs, well produced. Like, Express Yourself, literally, I think that's like a perfect song. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like, literally a perfect song. But then you listen to something like that, I'm like, you think the production is carrying the songs because the production back then was kind of ass. Like, it was a little bit suspect.
You know what it's like? It's like when you see old videos of Bob Cousy dribbling. Yeah. And you're like, this is revolutionary.
Yeah, they're like, yo, this guy was one of the best ball handlers of all time. I'm like, what?
And then you pull up clips of Allen Iverson, and it's just like, and it's crazy because Allen Iverson is still 20 years ago compared to now.
Yeah, exactly.
And so this really, really feels that way. I got a couple things to bring up before we get to lyrics. This album went platinum. 1 million copies in its first year, 3 million to date. We know one of the most iconic album covers, most popular albums, the movie Straight Outta Compton. Huge, huge historical moment for this project. In 2016, it became the first rap album inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. I think that's pretty special, being the first. Yeah. I don't know if it's warranted to be the thing. There's albums before Straight Outta Compton that probably should have been in there, but still very special for it to be the first. And then, who's your favorite voice on this project? You mentioned everyone introducing themselves over and over and over again, but my thought was some of these voices are like such iconic voices that, we're used to them now. Someone like Cube or even E. To me, it's Dr. Dre.
Yeah, me too. I was going to say that, but I was a little bit nervous.
No, I think it's so funny when we think about this ghostwriting, problem we've had for the past decade. Yeah. That's
another thing that I had to want to say, but go ahead.
And when you think of someone like Dre, who's open about not writing his own raps, open about not technically being a rapper, and how powerful his voice is. With someone like Cube, I think Cube is the best rapper in the group. Like, that's
not even close.
Pretty obvious.
Yeah, it's not even close.
But it's like, think of how good Dre sounds next to Cube when Dre's not a rapper. And it's like, that is something from the old time of like, it's more about the performance. I remember hearing stories about early rap records where it's not the actual person, right? The raps is performing, and that person may become popular. They were a security guard before then, had this book of raps, performed it. Yeah, it's big. So it's like, even the idea of, it's very obvious he's not writing his raps, but his performance is so on point. We have to include him. So Dre is a guy to me because his voice cuts through.
He raps Express Yourself. Like, that's him, like one of the signature songs from this group is the producer rapping it. Yep. Right? Yep. So I think that he's like, obviously one of the stars of the group by far, but this is another thing about this album to me, Straight Outta Compton, is like just really revealing to me about like the old head like mentality in hip hop, because I'm like, the thing of like the production carrying it that I already talked about, and then one of the things that people bag on like an artist like Drake is like, oh, you don't even write your raps. It's like, the fuck? Express Yourself. Dr. Dre didn't write that shit. Yep. Ice Cube and MC Ren were like writing, and Eazy-E. Yeah. Like, if you look at the credits, it's like a melange of those three, right? Yeah. But then you have a song like Express Yourself, one of the best songs that they've ever made, and Dr. Dre is rapping it.
And that's the thing too. I like that you mentioned that, because I think back in the day, it wasn't as much of a problem. Also, you had respect for people like Ice Cube, who are like MCs that write all their raps, someone like Nas as well. But I think about, an old collab with the Dream Warriors and Guru, where they wrote each other's raps. And, Guru wrote for the Dream Warriors, Dream wrote for Guru, and they just performed the other person's raps in a song they did together. Could you imagine Jay-Z and Eminem writing each other's verse in Renegade? That's craziness, now. But it's like, that was a thing that happened where it was like, we just want to make the best song, the best lyrics, however it comes together. One more thing is the death of rap groups.
That's not true, though. I feel like they came back a little bit.
Who are the rap groups right now?
Brockhampton.
They just died.
Right? Brockhampton, Odd Future.
Odd Future's not a thing anymore.
I know, but I'm saying like they're still around slightly.
I would still say this to Death Row because you named two groups that don't make music together anymore. So I think that proves my point. And rap groups in this way, like I think that rap was more of a collective thing back in the day. Obviously, I wasn't there, but the way that the music was made and how people came forward, like this group is 5-6 guys. You know, if you're including Yella and the Arabian Prince. Not everyone's rapping. Not everyone's as famous as the others. No one's getting that much like time on a song because there's so many guys.
Yeah, there's so many people.
You know, so it's like just the collective nature of what hip hop was to come forward as a group and how much sense that made. Now we're gonna talk about this later, but after this album, things changed a lot for this group.
Yeah,
and you know, it was a very different vibe.
Yeah,
but groups being dead, I think, is something that, as we talk more about hip hop going forward and we do our 90s review and our 2000s review, I'm sure we'll mention it again, but this was the big era for groups. And when you even fast forward 5 years, you know, after this, you see groups like Wu-Tang, Tribe, Outkast, and look how different they sound than this group. Everyone's not introducing themselves before every song. It's a different style of drums, different style of production. And so it's like, this is the way things change so quickly in hip hop. And what you said about the old heads, I think that's why the 90s is so loved. Yeah. Because if you compare the 90s to the 80s, that's probably the biggest jump in quality in hip hop history. You know, I think from 90s to 2000s out to 2010s, it's all pretty similar as you go forward. But in terms of jump in quality of music and quality of rapping, the 80s to the 90s is the biggest jump in hip hop history.
Quality of rapping? Let me tell you something right now. Like, no disrespect to what's happening right on Straight Outta Compton, but Paid in Full came out the same year, actually.
Yeah.
Rakim, the master. And it's night and day when you compare Rakim, because Rakim is literally one of the best rappers ever, and he's pioneered the multi-syllabic rapping, right? That is just literally, that is modern rapping. Yeah. Right? Like he's the Allen Iverson that we're talking about, you know?
Yes.
And when you listen to this Straight Outta Compton, it's like, whoa, bro. Like
it's crazy.
It's weird because people talk about Ice Cube as one of the best ever. And I'm listening to Straight Outta Compton, I'm like, really? Like not in a bad sense, because I think he's doing the best with the tools available to him, right? And again, Rakim came out the same year, so it's not like he had time to analyze and then put it in here. It's more of just like he somehow like catches a multi-syllabic rhyme, and I'm like, oh wow, right? But other than that, he's going for the ones, you know what I mean? And it's just interesting to hear that transition, because when you listen to something now, right, where it's like for somebody like Roddy Ricch, where the rapping is melodic, right? Yeah. So to go from monosyllabic to multi-syllabic to melodic is like huge jumps, you know what I mean? So it's just like Straight Outta Compton was basically like, this is the ending era of like 88, 89. This is like kind of like the ending of people like rapping one syllable at a time. And it's just really interesting to hear like even at the ending point, how simplistic it really is.
And I think the thing you said about simplicity, I think that is part of the energy of hip hop. This was the biggest gangster rap album of all time at that time. And it probably still is one of the biggest gangster rap albums of all time. And the messages that they had in the music, the effect it had outside the music we're going to talk about later. Yeah. Like, to have all that in a project that's your persona, everything, and then Express Yourself is one of your singles. Like
I know that's so crazy.
There's no world where 21 Savage puts out Express Yourself.
Yeah,
there's just no world where that happens. But it's like that was the tone of hip hop at that time, where a group that's this gangster can put out Express Yourself, and it's not you're corny, Eazy-E's not like that was. You can see on my stage like that was part of the time period of you could allow that. Now, you know, there's no way Future is putting out Express Yourself, right? And we're gonna have it be believable, you know. So I think that is such a huge part of the way that they're rapping. But again, it's like it's the climate. The thing that NWA did was I think their content was revolutionary. Right. You know, no one was coming at the cops that head on at that time. You know, in the way that they did.
I mean, when Fuck the Police came out, that was like their Mo Bamba.
Yeah.
That was their Family Ties. When like that shit played, they actually had to stop playing it.
No,
and for a period of time they had to stop playing it because when it played, people destroyed the venue.
No, it was madness. It was absolute madness.
And even to the point where I think they had like a show in Detroit.
Yeah, and
where they were told you cannot play the song.
Yeah.
And then when they played the song, like they got charged. The police ran up in the place. Like for them, express yourself and then also fuck the police. NWA was kind of a political group in the sense like freedom of expression, freedom of expression, freedom of speech was actually something that was important to them, right? And fuck the police was part of that. Like you should, to them, and part of their freedom of speech is like, I should be able to say this. This is my reality.
Yeah.
Right? The shit that is, fucking up Compton, my community, straight out of Compton. Like, it's making me feel this way. I should be able to say this. So even though on the surface, it seems like that shit doesn't make any sense that Straight Outta Compton and Express Yourself should be on the same album. But the underlying idea of like, this is about like freedom of expression and freedom of speech, then there's that connective tissue.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But on the surface, you're like, wait, gangster rappers are talking about expressing yourself? What's going on here? It's like, what are we talking about? Freedom of expression? Like, can you imagine Ice-T is like, yo, man, like, we got to fight for our rights. Like, what? But that's what NWA legit was doing.
I'm so happy you said that because I was watching a bunch of their interviews, preparing for this pod. And they're not as political as they've been made out to seem retroactively. If you watch their interviews, they don't sound political at all, It's just like, this is what's happening. Yeah. I'm telling you all what's happening, and you can't stop us from saying what we want to say. And you say it's the freedom of expression. So it's like all the political stuff that people have tied to that, and I think now what we've gone through over the past few years especially, it hits a different tone. Yeah. But that wasn't what it was at that point. It was not, we're organizing marches. That was not the whole really. Point of it. It was like, nah, like, I don't fuck with them.
Yeah, I don't fuck with the police. Fuck the police.
So I think, and then let's go back to the music. I have verse 3 from Dre on something like that, and it's just the way that they talk badly about other MCs that I think is so interesting. Right. Because that again was a huge part of 80s and even some in the 90s, but a huge part of 80s hip hop.
Yeah, you just other MCs.
About how whack other MCs are. It still happens today, but it's not as much so important in the music. You're more dissing other people, other celebrities, but just saying other MCs can't hang with me. Yeah. Not as much today. Dr. Dre says on verse 3, unlike a lot of suckers who claim they're getting busy when the records only make good frisbees.
I love that line. I have that written down.
I love we have the same shit. Yeah. You need to quit running off the mouth. Stop and think before you put some whack bullshit out. It's not difficult. In fact, it's kind of simple. Create something funky that's original, either talking about the place to be, who you are, what you got, or about a sucker MC. The end of that line, he just says what we just said. You're either talking about the place to be, who you are, what you got, or about a sucker MC. That's the formula right there. For him to put the formula that everyone's using in his record, I think is so interesting. Dr. Dre already had supreme confidence in his ability at that point of the kind of person he was, the kind of record producer he became. That I think is so interesting. And then as well, the idea of calling people sucker MCs. Run DMC was one of the options we were thinking about in terms of reviewing. They had that song, of course, sucker MCs. And that's why I go back to them as like, they've graduated from Run DMC but haven't made it to the Rakim level. Yeah. And that from that time is when everyone's calling each other sucker MCs. And in this part, I don't know who wrote this part for Dre, but it said it twice. Unlike a lot of suckers who claim they're getting busy, and then the end talking about a sucker MC. And it's like, think about the hardest rap group in the world, the biggest gangsters, that the world has seen are calling people sucker MC. He's like, that doesn't sound gangster to me. Yeah. But again, this is the time. Yeah. So Dre's gonna say it twice.
Yeah, exactly. I think that what they say, sometimes it ages well. Like, even though calling somebody a sucker MC, I would say has not aged well in the year 2023. But there is a lot of things about their music, what they rap about, ages super, super well. I mean, fuck the police. That shit, you could drop that shit today.
That aged great.
That aged beautifully. Beautifully, beautifully. I would say literally, like, you could just read the lyrics top to bottom, and that shit is relevant today. But I want to point out one part that has two things that are included in it. This was from '88, so Ice Cube not afraid to use homophobic slurs, right? And that is like, that was in Fuck the Police, which I was like, damn, bro. Like, that's one thing that aged poorly. I'm like, fuck, bro. I can't believe that this is included in the song. I don't remember it in that song at all. But again, reading the lyrics, you're like, damn, I can't believe he said that. But this is in Fuck the Police, where he's like, search a nigga down, grabbing his nuts. And on the other hand, without a gun, they can't get none. Right? But don't let it be a black and a white one, because they'll slam you down to the street top. Black police showing out for the white cops. Right? That part, even though it sounds like kind of like a throwaway line, and also in the 80s, like, he's able to recognize something that, like, has been, like, now, like, studied, scientifically studied, that, like, black officers, when they're with white officers, are typically, like, more aggressive, right? To show that they're part, like, the in-group with white officers. And I just thought that was, like, brilliant that he said that. I was
so poignant, so poignant.
Like, his observation of that is actually incredible. And obviously, when you live that, like, when you're living in the situation of like living in Compton in the 1980s, you're more exposed to that racialized, like, policing. But for him to include that in the raps is, like, I don't know. I thought that was so amazing, because, like, now, like, that is something that is, widely accepted. Like, this is, again, scientifically, like, proven. But for in the 80s to include that and be like, I already see this. You don't even have to talk about it. This is something that we already recognize is incredible. Yeah. Right? So I thought that that's something that Fuck the Police.
Ages well regardless,
right? Except for the homophobic thing in the which is literally the bar above what I was rapping about.
Crazy.
That song ages beautifully in 2023, especially, like, I don't, like, pick your controversy in America right now. You can get to a point where you're just like, pick whichever controversy
literally
that has happened in America in the past. I think that Fuck the Police aged beautifully. Like, this I don't know if it's a perfect song, but, like, that's one of those.
I think it is a perfect song, honestly. I feel like it is right there. And what you mentioned about the black cop showing out for the white cop, that's what happened in Detroit. They did an interview talking about Detroit. That is what happened in Detroit. And the cops that arrested them were black, and so they had to make an example out of them. So it's like, think how on point he is to where it comes into his life.
Yeah, in real life. Yeah, it happened after the song comes out.
Crazy. And the thing I thought about with this song, especially Fuck the Police, is that Ice Cube and Dr. Dre have become household names since this album came out. And to think about the rappers that are now household names in the mainstream and their early lyrics and work, it's some of the most violent, like, misogynistic rappers.
Yeah, facts.
Like Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, I think of Snoop, who is, on every commercial now. And I don't know if we're going to end up doing one of Snoop's albums, but when you talk about Snoop's early work and his lyrical content, it's like, isn't that so crazy that these guys whose lyrical content was basically way worse than anything we hear today are the ones who are the faces of things today, and rappers today still violent, still getting a little racy, but would not say some of the stuff that was being said in the 80s.
Yeah.
I think that's so interesting that this time has changed where society is more sensitive now, but we are empowering the people who were less sensitive when society was less sensitive.
Yeah. And it's also like, there's like this weird, like, even like a song like I Ain't the One.
I Ain't the One's a banger.
I don't know if it's a banger. I just, like, that's one of those tracks where I'm like, it's almost like Ice Cube is red pilled. I felt like that is like a like
that song I think would bang today, but this is an example of the culture changing. The culture now is to rap about doing that. Right. What he's saying he's not gonna do in paying for a woman's things.
Yeah.
The culture now is, you've heard the Migos on every song.
Yeah.
Buy the Birkin, all that.
Yeah.
The culture has changed. So it's like that, to me, it's like he's red pilled in a sense, but that's how the culture has changed, is where I'm sure this has been happening throughout history over the past 50 or so years. But at that point, he's rapping against that. Right. And now rappers, that's a brag of like, I paid for all these girls' titties, or I did. That's like a flex now.
Yeah.
And so it's like, look how things have changed, where I'm sure maybe Ice Cube wouldn't be, but if Ice Cube had come out in 2015, and I Ain't the One probably has a whole different connotation.
Yeah, I Am the One, like, now is like, whoa, bro. Like, why do you, like, I Am the One is basically a track about somebody who doesn't want to be played, right? But the way he raps about it is in like this extremely aggressive, and like, this is where, I mean, hip hop has always had the label of being misogynistic. But when you listen to this song, you're like,
I get it.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, I can see why.
Y'all know all the way wrong.
Yeah, like, I'm like, okay, yeah, you know, I can see why we were talking about it like that, right? Because the way he, I mean, it's literally every misogynistic trope in the book that he's throwing out there. You know, women only want dudes for money. You know, I'm only sleeping with you, and like I only say the words to you just to get you in bed, and like you after they sleep together, it's like literally at the end of the song, he's like, beat it, like I got what I wanted, I get out of here.
Crazy.
So that song did not age well, I would say. Did not age well.
Depends who you ask.
Did not age well. But it's up and down, you know? Like, I think, and also that's another one of those tracks, like, there's like no melody. And like, that's one of those songs where Ice Cube is really going like this, and I need to do that. And I'm like, why are you rapping? Like, I think right now we're in a state of rapping, you're kind of like smooth, or you're too cool, you know what I mean? Then in I Ain't the One, he's like, you will never ever play me type, you know? Like,
yeah,
but
it's very theatric.
Yeah, he's like
very theatrical.
When you're listening to it, you can literally see him doing like this. You know, it's like, you'll never play me. Can't believe you ever said that. I was like, you're never gonna get money out of me. Like, bro, calm down. And it's also the mono-syllabic rapping accentuates it.
Yeah.
Right? Accentuates it where he's at the point of it's just like, why are you yelling, bro?
It's such a
oh my God.
I think a lot about this project is
I think that song aged the worst. Like out of all the songs.
Oh, for sure. Because no one makes a song like that now. I think that there are people that feel that way, and I think rappers have talked about these things in verses today.
Yeah.
Like I've heard Kendrick and Drake both make bars about, oh, you pay for her time, like kind of shading other guys like, oh, you're showing me you're paying for it, that kind of thing. That still happens, but a song this direct, this aggressive, and including a part where he's like, gotcha, bitch. Like,
what?
Like
you're not rapping like that.
And I think too, this is where hip hop was as a whole. Let's talk about hip hop history and kind of like where it had come from 73 up until 88. The early part of hip hop, the first 10 years or so, was very performance based.
Yeah.
There was people putting out records, but there was much more performing going on than records coming out. Now, I think you would easily say it's the opposite, where it feels like there's so many songs coming out every day, every week. But at that point, it was much more performance. Freestyling, battling in the street, performing at parties. Cyphers. So the performance part of it is almost how you got your style of rap. Because there's a lot of rappers who we've seen live who it sounds one way in the studio, but when you do the song live, you kind of got to alter it and change your energy. This is like the live energy on the song, which was very much what was happening at that time. Yeah,
I think there are times where I feel like it's less of a performance and more of like we're trying to make a song, which is express yourself. Express yourself, again, I think is, personally, I have an affinity for express yourself because this is the first song I've ever seen my father rap from beginning to end.
Wow. That's impressive.
So, yeah, and it's a long song. It's almost like 5 minutes. But there's also like, there's a situation where, you know, even the multi-syllabic part comes in. This is a part where I think it ages really well. And also like it feels less of a performance and more of like trying to craft a song, right? This is verse 2 of Express Yourself where Dr. Dre is rapping again. Dr. Dre, I think, had the best performance. He's like, Dr. Dre is back. New jacks are made to follow. Expressing ain't their subject because they like to follow. The words, the style, the trend, the records I spin again and again and again. Yo, you on the other end. Watch your brothers saying dope rhymes with no help. There's no fessing and guessing while I'm expressing myself, right? That is when that is like the real time where like it's starting to like do the Rakim thing where internal rhymes, multi-syllabic rhymes, and that's why that part is probably the best part in the song because that you can't just. I mean, maybe somebody can if you're like Black Thought or like Logic or if you're like Juice WRLD.
Yeah,
you could just rip that off off the cuff, but for 99% of the population, they gotta rehearse that shit multiple times. Yeah, like that passage I give you, you have to rehearse it, right? And that's where it felt like, oh, this is like really, this song was partially, they made it, there's no swearing in it, so they're trying to get on radio with this.
Yeah.
But that part is also like, that part specifically is ear candy. Like every time he goes into that part, you feel like you want to rap it, right? So I think that the majority of what they're doing is for like, the performance, but Express Yourself, that was like, we're trying to do this for the radio. We're trying to do this for the record. We're trying to do this when like you're listening to it, you want to hear it again and again and again, right? Because you're on the other end, right? Literally in the lyrics, right? So I think that you're absolutely right, but that's like the only time, and that's why I'm saying like I think Express Yourself legitimately is like a perfect rap song. Like the more I think about it, the more I'm coming to that resolution.
I think a lot of people would agree with you. And I feel like this is what's most impressive about this project is songs like Express Yourself that are clearly a song for the radio, clearly a song to be more mainstream. And to have your first hit or your first single Straight Outta Compton and you're still attempting to be part of the mainstream, you're big. Like to think about that duality of we have a song called Fuck the Police, but please play us on the radio.
Yeah, play us on the radio, please.
And to have a song that is clearly for that, but done so well from a group that has this persona, that's the thing that I think is so impressive. Because when you have your personas a certain way, it's hard to step outside of that without it seeming corny or fake. I always mention when Logic did that song, it sounded like Nav. And it was like, Logic, like, we don't need you to be sounding like Nav. You're not giving us the lean drinking energy here, So they did a great job with Express Yourself of them actually pulling it off where there's no point where you're like, this is phony. It feels authentic, which is like, to feel authentic with Express Yourself and Fuck the Police.
Right.
Very, very, very hard to do. I want to talk about the cover because iconic cover.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have this on vinyl, and I think the cover is obviously a huge part of that. This is, I think, an example of a cover that would not happen today.
Oh, you think so?
I think so for two reasons.
Okay.
For two reasons. I think that on the cover, holding a gun, pointing it at the camera.
Oh yeah, maybe not.
I think that probably wouldn't be a thing. And then as well, like. There's so many people in this group that on the cover, like you can kind of see everyone clearly in a sense, but it makes you have to look harder and be like, is that yellow right there? Is that Ren? Is that so and so? And I think nowadays, groups don't really exist in the same way, but I think nowadays more people in a group would want their shine, so to speak.
Right.
Be like, oh, highlight me more, show my face more, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that the cover is immaculate. I think that this kind of encapsulates hip hop in a lot of ways. Like the group, it's almost like they're in the cypher, but also it reinforces their gangster rap attitude where it's like you're on the ground because they just like jumped you. Like I feel like
because they just jumped you.
I feel like
actually though,
I feel like this is I just got jumped type of energy. But it also like the change, the perspective where it looks like you're looking up and down at like the same time. So there's a lot of great things that are happening on it. I think that even the lettering, to make it abrasive, like the cover, iconic. Iconic for a reason.
For sure.
The cover is iconic for a reason. It's like good ass cover. And it's also like this is their debut project.
Yeah, we didn't mention that debut project.
Yeah, it's their debut project, so it kind of helps to have everybody on it. And that's part of the reason why everybody wants to introduce themselves on the song because, like we mentioned with Express Yourself, like you're trying to get on the radio. You want to be on the radio. You're trying to spin on the radio. And if you're on the radio and nobody knows who the people are, then it kind of gets weird because then it's like, how do I find the group? It's, that type of stuff. And the cover is kind of part of that. Like, it's our debut album, Straight Outta Compton. We want to make sure everybody knows what everybody looks like. So everybody's got to be on the cover.
Yep.
But you are right because I'm thinking about like, somebody like Brockhampton right now, or with their first, like Saturation, which is like the breakout for them, it was only one member on the front.
Yeah.
Right? And you would have to kind of go back to look at other projects to be like, wait, who else is in the group? You can look it up now, but it's a little bit different. So maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. It's something that can only happen back then. But I would love to see it happen again. I would love to see somebody recreate it or something.
Yeah, I think if there is a group that would do this, this cover is so iconic that it would be they'd have to have someone's blessing for sure. I think about when Quavo and Takeoff had their project called Only Built for Infinity Links.
Yeah.
Obviously, they got the blessing of Raekwon and Ghost. And the cover was very much looked like an Outkast cover.
Oh, yeah.
So, things like that, it's like, if you get the blessing of those people, I'm sure it could happen. But groups, are not really a thing anymore. So, probably not. I want to talk about a bit about how this affected their careers.
Yeah.
We've mentioned it a bunch of times on this project, but the debut project for NWA, Niggas with Attitude, Straight Outta Compton, in '88. Shortly after, this group basically breaks up.
It was over.
Yeah, shortly after, it's over. And Eazy-E and Dre were kind of going at each other. One thing I didn't mention before is Eazy-E is mentioned as an executive on this project, and so whatever deal they had, Eazy-E had some control, over the project, over the group, and it is kind of sad to see that this group kind of, broke up so quickly, and they had their beefs, and of course with Eazy-E passing in '95, that made it sad as well. But the music that was made after this project from, in particular, Dre and Cube, really grew from this.
Yeah.
It really, really came from that era. I think of America's Most Wanted and Death Certificate. If you hear the way that Ice Cube is rapping, it is very adjacent to this NWA style. It's closer to the Rakim style at that point. Solo, I think he gets closer to that, but it's very akin to this NWA style. Dr. Dre, his first solo project he puts out is The Chronic in '92, and we all know what that did. And I think it was classic after classic for Dre after that, and he became a household name. But this was the launching off point that made so many of these guys household names.
Yep.
Like after this one group project first album, we knew who Eazy-E was. We knew who MC Ren was. We knew who Dr. Dre was. So this, what Dre and Cube becoming household names, I think this, they did stuff afterwards. I think that really helped that for sure, especially Cube in the early '90s. I think that's something that people who are our age, most of his albums are before we were even born.
Yeah.
That they forget how impactful he was at that time, how big he was at that time. But all of that, I think, derives from Straight Outta Compton, and the credibility of that project and the popularity of that project. So, this was the launching off point for a few solo careers in a way that we haven't really seen.
Yeah, and it was also just huge in the sense of it wasn't a protest album in like something like Public Enemy would drop, but it was still like an FU type of album.
For sure.
Right? And it was one that you could do it and then becomes super successful out of it. And become, I don't know if you were becoming mainstream. I guess Express Yourself was a mainstream song, but this was wow, you can still do.
You can be big, yeah.
Yeah, you can do something that's fuck you, and people fuck with it, and it's this is part of the mainstream now.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that it's just interesting to see the origin point for somebody like Ice Cube, who is now executive producing movies or was in child movies, to go from
shout out the Big Three.
Yeah, to go from the Big Three as well. So to go from a gangster rapper to somebody who appears in child movies is an insane trajectory as a human being.
It's I think about the stuff he did personally that were violent in the public, and some of his songs. It's who into give an example of today's rap. We'll even go back 25 years. Who in the modern era of hip hop could be so publicly violent, whether it's verbally or actually physically? And down the line, it's I trust you with taking my kids on a trip.
Yeah,
it's
rare.
It's very, very rare. It's very rare. And I think that's the part of hip hop that as we go forward, we're gonna see that part is dead. Because once there's a certain DMX is not gonna be the next Ice Cube. You know, rest in peace, but he wasn't. If you're violent at a certain time period, it's just this is just
Yeah,
the
that's your
box,
persona. You're
the
kind of
box that you're in. So I think it's very interesting that, we see that change happening over time.
Yeah, I think like this is I said this about Fuck the Police earlier, but it's like one of the also early songs that you could point to, whereas like the song came on and it was fucking shit up. Like people think like that seems to be a more modern phenomenon now, just because people make music in that style to do that now.
Yes,
right,
yes.
mosh pits and stuff like that. But Fuck the Police, like seriously, man. If you look at if you just like Google or watch a couple of documentaries about the early parts of hip hop, they destroyed venues when that song came out.
Yeah, no, actually.
They would destroy
thousands of dollars in damages.
Thousands of dollars in damage. They couldn't perform in certain places because they were like, I don't want, it's not worth the time and the money to get you to perform here, and then I have to repair all this shit and I have to shut down the venue. It's costing too much money, right? So it's really interesting to see that, the protest angle, and just the idea, like now that we really read into it, is like the fact that they were like a fighting for your rights type of group.
Crazy.
It did not seem that way when it first came out, especially when Public Enemy was out at the same time as them. But, they're talking about freedom of expression and like racism.
Yeah.
Basically. That's like the primary motives of their music. So it's
which aged well.
Which ages well,
yeah.
Because I would say we are now focusing more and more on that as just like, that is a mainstream thought.
Yes,
now,
yes.
Right? Before then, it was like, it was abrasive and we're trying to break out, we're trying to like show people, and it's like, now this is like, people talk about this on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, this is a real like everyday type of discussion, right? So I just think I think that part is dope. That's an underrated part of their legacy. I think not many people will point to.
And I think it's rare. I think it's something that obviously we have to mention. Like huge. I'm sure Fuck the Police went up in streams in the summer of 2020.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, we had to mention them. But I think this is one of the few examples of a group that doesn't come in as political, but still has that effect.
Yeah.
Comparing them to Public Enemy, who was,
that was who they were.
Yeah, intentionally political.
Yeah.
To a group like, NWA, who I don't think that was their intention.
No.
But, that's kind of what the effect they had. So very rare that happens. I feel like this question should be a skip for us, but we're going to talk about a little bit. Getting the vinyl. This is an obvious cop. Obviously, we're talking about classic albums here, so I don't even ask, will you be getting the vinyl? But I think that this is a vinyl that should be a have in someone's hip-hop collection. Yeah. I know people who are older than me who do have this on vinyl, and they speak highly about how it plays on the record. But I feel like for the classic albums, this is I think higher than some of the other ones we had on our poll because of the cover too.
That's true.
You had to have this on vinyl. Yeah.
It's a great piece to just like, if you have like shelves in your room or in a living room or something like that, just put it up on the shelf. I think that's just like, it's cool to look at.
Yeah.
I think it is a vinyl cop just off of the strength of the music.
Yes.
I think there is definitely there are songs that are dated. Like, we have to acknowledge 8 Ball. We have to acknowledge I Ain't the One, and we have to acknowledge something like that.
Yeah.
Those
ones?
Those are like those are hella dated. And you just gotta acknowledge that. I think that you have to just be like, this is the beginnings, this is where we came from, and you just have to let it rock.
So where are you in terms of a score then?
I think, even though people are gonna be like, oh, of course it's 10 out of 10 NWA.
It's not.
It's not a 10 out of 10. There is an album that I think we'll end up reviewing that I would give like a genuine 10 out of 10.
Okay.
I think this is like an 8.5, which is still, I think it's obviously a classic. I mean, the highs are Express Yourself, bro. Like, that's on this album. Express Yourself. Yeah. You think about like a game like, we didn't even mention this about Legacy, but Express Yourself like was on Skate.
Yeah.
Skate, the video game. That was the signature song.
Yep.
Right? And that game came out in 2011, I think.
Yeah.
So almost 30 years in advance of like
that song is still in commercials.
Yeah, and it's still in commercials. Like Fuck the Police and Express Yourself. Those are gonna get played literally until humans stop existing. Those songs are still gonna get played, right? So those things like extending just. I don't think they had any idea, especially with Express Yourself, how like how like good of a song that was.
Yeah.
Fuck the Police. I definitely think that they understood like this is gonna have some rage energy, and they would never say rage because that wasn't a thing back then.
Yeah.
But they understood that, right? But that longevity, that legacy of those songs is insane. Like actually insane how much is actually stretched out from that. Because you don't even have to be like a big time hip hop listener to love those songs.
Straight Outta Compton too.
Yeah. So and Straight Outta Compton as well. I think the rapping is good. Like on Express Yourself, there's some multi-syllabic parts. Ice Cube actually like has parts where again he is rapping in multi-syllables. Most of the time, it is monosyllable. You gotta accept the, my name is Ice Cube, I'm here from Compton, and I'm like, you gotta accept that. But it's not so bad where it's unlistenable. Because there is, at this point, I will say, if you were a Young Thug, Roddy Ricch, Drake fan, there is a point in hip hop where it's just not going to work for you anymore.
Yeah, this is I think one of those.
Yeah, I think this is like just teetered over onto like it's gonna be listenable. You can still listen to it regardless of where your basis is in hip hop, but you gotta be aware of the multi-syllable things. But it's still great music, bro.
No, very very good music. I do think this is on the borderline of, because you know what I think too is that they're so congruent with the 90s and what you think of with the 90s that people forget this is really 80s rap.
Yeah,
like, and it sounds like 80s rap. So I think the rap style doesn't age as well just because 80s rap just sounds like a whole different genre compared to what's going on right now. Straight Outta Compton by NWA, I would give it a 7.
Wow.
Out of 10. The thing that really stood out to me that we didn't mention at all, but this is like, because this is a classic album, we're looking at it from a different lens. This album is very much one note. Like the diversity, the diversity of this project, the different tones of this project, the subject matter of this project, like the different subject matter is really express yourself and something to dance to, and then I Ain't the One. That's as different as it gets. Other than that, it's the same content basically through every song. I'm introduce myself, you're a sucker MC, and I'm the biggest gangster. Yeah. Other than that, it's all what's the same. But other than those things of like it being very much one note in terms of the content and the sound, still a very good project. This also is a throwback to the era of a 13-song project being an hour.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Like
the songs are so long.
13 songs in an hour is from a whole different era. So this is gonna be a 7 for me.
I am genuinely shocked by that. I thought I was lower on it.
Nah, here's my thing. And I think we're gonna get through a lot of our classic albums, and hopefully the one that you have a 10 is one I have as a 10 as well. But I think a lot of classic albums aren't necessarily 10 out of 10 albums. And there are albums that are 10 out of 10 albums that aren't as widely considered a classic as other albums. I agree. A lot of times an album being classic is based on the singles that become those moments.
And its cultural significance.
And that comes a lot from singles, So it's like your singles help build cultural significance, and that might not be what the album reflects. Right. So, I don't feel bad about having a 7. 7 is still a good score for us here in album mode. If you listen to us for the first time, I'm happy you tuned in for this episode because this one was definitely worth it.
Dude, I'm in costume. Come on.
Yeah, I got the Boys in the Hood shirt on. We're here for NWA. We're gonna be doing a bunch of these. Over the next few months. Choose an album from each decade, maybe 2 albums for one decade. We haven't decided which decade that will be yet, but we're gonna go through some old albums, talk about some old artists, some old singles, and just kind of do a little, review of hip hop as a whole for the 50th anniversary. Please follow us on the interwebs at Album Mode Pod on Twitter, Album Mode Pod on TikTok, Album Mode Pod on Instagram, and brand new Album Mode Pod on YouTube. Yes. We finally made it to YouTube. Please subscribe to us on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to us on all your podcast platforms too. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Leave us a rating and a review. 5 stars, not a single star less. We're trying to get up those rankings. Please and thank you. And of course, until next time, know yourself, know your worth.
Later days. Oh, also, like, comment, and subscribe.
Like, comment, and fucking subscribe.
That's a thing for us now. All right, later days.